What's going on, everybody? Mala here. How you all doing today? First of all, thank you for tuning in and welcome to the channel. I didn't think this would be our first video, but friends keep asking me stuff on them. So, MacBook Pro 2016. And I guess it's fitting, get this over with before we leap into the next year. TLDR intro is, there's tons to be excited about here, even though not everything is quite there yet. Allow me to explain. First, the build quality is amazing. Apple is at the top of their game, and I don't think there's a single other manufacturer at the same level yet. I, for one, wasn't longing for a thinner MacBook Pro, but the fact that it's lighter, yeah, that's cool. Second, there's the trackpad. That thing is huge. It doesn't really matter if you've seen video or pictures of it. Once you get one in person, you are going to be impressed. Being that big though, it takes up space otherwise used for a palm rest, so palm ejection had to be good. Depending on how you use it, a couple of people actually had issues with it right-clicking when they were just, trying to use the trackpad with the same hand they're resting on. But I didn't have that issue because I use a 2-finger tap for right-clicking. A couple of colleagues actually switched to my method because of that. Even so, this trackpad is just great. Third on the list, display. And what did you expect? Everything on it looks fantastic. Same amount of pixels as before, but wider color gamut and much brighter screen. Kind of overkill, but come on, don't tune it all the way up. Next up come the speakers, and they are leagues ahead of everything else. Apple did set the bar way high with the 12-inch MacBook a couple of years back, and now they just improved on it. It sounds awesome. There appears to be a little difference in clarity when comparing the 15-inch models with the 13-inch ones. I didn't get to test the 13-inch model, so I can't really say. And the last kind of easy thing to talk about is the keyboard. Bit of a gray area. People who like more mechanical keyboards, bigger travel, didn't really like it. But if you've used the first generation butterfly switch and liked it, or if you're halfway down that road still using something like an Apple wireless keyboard, for example, you're probably going to find it pretty good. I played with it for about 15 days, maybe 20, and I actually liked the keyboard. But I'm coming from using that. And finishing off with the easy stuff, finally, we got TouchID on a Mac. Too bad they don't sell a wireless keyboard with that already in it. I would love to be able to use something like that on my setup. Okay, so easy stuff gone, let's jump into the more complicated bits. First off, price. $1.5 to $4.3 thousand. That's the range. Actually, if you get Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro X with it, that brings you closer to $4.8 thousand. So almost 5K, just not resolution. Mate, that's a bad joke. Oh, and if you need a machine with 4 cores and 16 gigs of RAM, which is also the maximum amount you will ever have in a machine like this because it's permanent, your entry point is actually $2.4 thousand bucks, and you're cut off from the 13-inch models. Yeah, I know what you're gonna say next. For that amount of money, you can buy, build, abduct a machine that will have more powerful internals, and the performance is probably gonna be better than the MacBook Pro in many areas. Just remember this. With any of these other options, you're not getting access to the Apple ecosystem and its software-hardware integration. It doesn't matter if it's a cliche or not, the performance you're gonna get from this integration is really impressive sometimes. One such example, Final Cut Pro, editing this video way faster than Premiere. That is, if you ignore the fact that you can get access to that integration and ecosystem with the 2015 15-inch MacBook Pro that will run you fully spec'd out for about $2.9 thousand bucks. Entry point being around 2,000, I think. And this is why I guess everybody's putting a lot of weight into the "it's expensive" adjective for these MacBook Pros. When you get that all together and you put in the ports, they are really not helping Apple's case much. Because yeah, USB Type-C may be super versatile and may be the future. It's 6 months, a year from now. But here in the present, if you need to connect stuff to your MacBook, you're gonna need adapters, which translates to even higher cost on top of the premium for the MacBook Pros themselves. So dongles are more of a monetary hassle in my opinion. If you're using your MacBook Pro as a workstation and it's just gonna sit on your desk substituting something like that, having stuff connected to it with adapters in between or not isn't that much of a big deal. And if you're on the go and you still need a bunch of stuff with you to connect to your notebook, you're already carrying loads. So a couple of adapters ain't really gonna suddenly over encumber you that much. I'll say this much though, for some demographics, no SD card kinda isn't a very pro move. But then again, for the average pro user, even the SD card is not going to be that missed. Now, since we've started comparing specs, let's talk about performance because it's the obvious next stop on the track. This is a point where better and worse keep being thrown around, but since tests fluctuate so much, let's just compromise in the middle. Performance on the new MacBook Pros is basically the same as last year's, and I don't think that's unintentional. But it is another hurdle when talking about a new generation of a MacBook Pro, because it's not adding anything to the table on the performance side of things. Well, yes, it now has dedicated graphics chips and the SSDs are crazy fast. If you haven't seen it yet, check out TOT's video on it, link in the description. But both of these upgrades are actually dependent on circumstance. For example, editing videos, pretty much everybody's getting better performance using the 2015 rather than the 2016 models. And Geekbench also gets better results on the 2015 ones. My experience, on the other hand, was basically on the same level. I couldn't really tell. Even if the 2015 models were actually faster, the difference was marginal, so I'm not going to jump to either side of the fence. Still, expectations on a new generation of a machine with Pro in the name are probably not going to be in the same performance side of things. Speaking of expectations, the 2015 models had decent battery life, so I'm guessing we shouldn't expect a machine with 40% less battery. Yeah, that's the thing with the awesome design. Something had to give, and pretty much any other components would have been much too complicated to trim and make more compact. So off with his head! Still, this doesn't mean actual 40% less battery life, because these MacBook Pros have more power efficient internals, so they can kind of compensate for the fact that the battery size is 40% smaller. If it wasn't for that beautiful screen we talked about earlier. The fact that it's so bright actually means it sucks way more juice out of the battery, so you're actually getting 20 to 30% less usage on a single charge. The reason I point this out like this is still a notebook. Even if the new MacBook Pros were, say, 15% faster compared to last year's, dying out 20 to 30% earlier means the maximum amount of work you'll be able to get done is still going to be 5 to 15% less. And that counts as a performance factor in my books. And then we have the beautiful TouchBar. Super interesting technology, but it's very early out of the gate, and pretty much everybody has a little bit of trouble figuring out actual usability. For example, I've never used the function keys much, so in the time I had with the machine, I found myself constantly using keyboard shortcuts because I'm really used to them, and sometimes I would stop and think, no, I need to test everything, so I'm gonna use the touch bar for this. There are many people who find it super useful, and yeah, there are many people who didn't. Some actually suggested that the touch bar would have been more useful if it were between the keyboard and the trackpad instead of all the way up. One thing though, if you're the kind of person that uses your notebook closed up and with everything plugged in on your desk, the touch bar just went from possibly interesting to completely useless because you can't reach it. Oh, and on that note, Apple, please do something like this with a touch bar, or at least TouchID. But the thing that jumped out the most about the touch bar for me was something I realized after seeing Day2D's video. The touch bar keeps getting you to look at it in order to use the shortcuts it provides. Yes, you can customize it to a certain extent, there are restrictions, but it still kind of needs your attention to get anything done. Otherwise it just feels like you're not appreciating it enough. And I think this is a first. It's a screen made by Apple in a MacBook Pro that gets you out of your content to look at it, to use other stuff that you could either do with a shortcut on your keyboard or your trackpad/mouse. Doesn't matter if it's content you're consuming or creating, it's still pulling you out of it. Attention. I know that's not that big of a deal, it's not super problematic or anything, but I find it interesting because to me, everything Apple does with displays has always been focused on content immersion. So I guess that's it. The new MacBook Pros come bundled with a bunch of compromises, and it's obviously going to depend on your kind of usage whether or not it is the right fit for your needs. I'd actually go for the 2015 models or other solutions if price is an issue. If not, although not cheap, you're definitely not going to be disappointed with what you get. Remember, there's a lot of interesting stuff here. My take on it is, I like them due to form, but to the average pro user, I can't really recommend them due to the entire package. And I guess this wraps up our review of the 2016 MacBook Pros. When our unit actually arrives, if our experience with it and feelings change at all during more extensive use, I will definitely make sure to update you guys on it, even if it's, I don't know, 3-4 months down the line. Until then, thanks so much for tuning in and watching. I hope you guys enjoyed our first video, and if yes, like and subscribe so you won't miss out on our next ones. Also, any comments or suggestions, be sure to leave them down below. I am Mala, and I hope to see you again soon.